In every serious lifter's life, there will inevitably come a moment where they feel stuck. Usually, this looks like your lifts aren't improving, there's no improvement to body composition, there's a ton of frustration, which leads to ultimately a lack of motivation to train. And I believe that this is an inevitable and a necessary point in your journey that you have to go through. And it's a part of every lifter and athlete's journey, if you ask them. So as a natural consequence, this ends up becoming known as the inevitable intermediate phase. So what this does is leads us to looking into education and learning more about how our body works and about how we can lift smarter in order to get more results. Now, when most people start, they usually look into bro science, the things that the most jacked guy at the gym says to do, and you just kind of do it, and you talk with buddies and you spend time on forums and you do that. And then this works for a while, but at the point, once you're in the intermediate phase, you're smart enough to know and realize that not all bro science is created equal, and a lot of it is just made up shit. So to break out of this phase, we have to learn something new and take our training up a notch, which we all typically end up going to the evidence-based or science-based community. Overall, I would say this can be a lot better, and is a lot better than just the random bro science. After all, the evidence-based community has been incredible in terms of information and opening up better discussions in regards to our training. But at the same time, there seems to be, to me anyway, to be an overabundance of this information, which tends to create more noise than anything that's actually substantial or could significantly help a lot of people. So all this information just leads to information overload, where you almost can't even commit to a program for long enough to see results, because every week there is a new study that will revolutionize the way that everything's done. Except in reality, there never really is. And the truth is, I would argue that not a whole hell of a lot has changed how bodybuilders and physique athletes really train over the last 20 years or so. And so because of this, and because of all this information, especially from the evidence-based community, there's three main issues that I find that tends to happen from here, that at least these are the ones that I kind of have a little bit of issues with. And one, it's just massaging studies to make them seem better than what they actually are for the sake of creating content. Because we're in this new information age. We're in this creator economy that a lot of people call it. And people will make content just for the sake of making content. And fuck, I might even be guilty of it. I don't know. But we're just cherry picking studies at this point to fit some narrative that they want to fill. Two, it's oddly argumentative and idealistic and mostly emotionally driven, leading to really unnecessary arguments and just reasons that people are finding to have a problem with something or to start some sort of emotional response. And three, it's a hub for overthinking and gives a lot of people excuses not to take the necessary action that they need to take. And I was in one of these boats where you'll sit there and you'll look at, all right, should I do lengthened partials or shortened partials or full range of motion? And you'll sit there and think about it and switch your workouts every second or third workout because you watched a new video some educator put out about what would be the most optimal. And in this pursuit of optimal, we get nowhere because you can't optimize what you're not already doing. So I'm going to go through kind of what, in my opinion, give a couple of examples of why this is the case. So first, when it comes to massaging studies for the sake of content, I saw a lot of people talking about this 52 sets per week of volume study saying oh, see, more volume, high volume's better, whatever. And there's a couple of things you have to look at whenever you actually read the study. And whenever these people present studies, you have to look at these things with a grain of salt. And shout out Lyle McDonald for this because he pointed a lot of this out. And then I went in and read and was like, oh shit, well, I guess he's right. So first, in the 52 sets per week study, participants went to, for the first 2 sets anyway, before the set to absolute failure, they went to volitional failure. And if you know what volitional means, it basically means they went when they thought they couldn't go anymore. Meaning their limitation pretty much would have been the amount of pain tolerance they could tolerate. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever done a set of quad extensions to absolute failure, quad extensions fucking hurt. And they hurt mad. So, and I know a lot of people don't have a super high pain tolerance. And judging by what I see in the gym, a lot of people have no clue how to even train to get remotely close to failure. So there's one, and that's going to lead to, skewing of results and drastically different outcomes for different people. Two, they use the back squat, and the back squat is a very, very technical lift. And so a lot of the gains that happen from that is because they probably got better at squatting because they squatted more, because squatting is a skill in itself. And if you learn how to do it, you will get better as your technique improves, but you're not necessarily going to just automatically gain muscle. That doesn't necessarily mean it was gaining muscle, right? But in this study, they did show some, but a lot of it just came down to they just got better at squatting and being able to use their body in the proper leverages so that they could get more muscle because they squatted so damn much. And so really this whole study, after reading through it, made me zoom out and realize, like, we look at bodybuilding over the last 20 to 30 years, like, we know what works, right? There's not really a new discussion or anything super revolutionary that's changing the way how we build muscle and how bodybuilders train. So and time again, we go from, Arnold's era where they were doing stupid high volumes. And then you have guys like Dorian Yates, who's doing, like, as far as overall sets, he's doing 1, maybe 2 sets to failure. His volume's still relatively high because of the amount of weight that he's doing. But, like, we know that mechanical tension is the primary driver of hypertrophy, and it does not require 52 sets a week to do it. So that's my point on that. 2, it's oddly argumentative and idealistic and emotionally driven. So people treat a lot of this scientific evidence-based stuff like a religion and act like it's a sin if you don't necessarily agree with it or if you say something like it doesn't work for you. I mean, people talk shit on high volume. People talk shit on low volume. It's kind of like people that talk shit on diets. Like, oh, if carnivore's the way, or, oh, if you're vegan, you're dumb. Like, no, it does. It's like whatever is going to work for you, just do it. Because at the end of the day, what you can stick to over a longer period of time is going to be what's going to work for you. And we know that a lot of different things work. The science has shown that a lot of different things can work. And by closing yourself off to one point of view, you're limiting your own potential and those, as well as those people that might actually need genuine help along the way. And those same people might not work well with the thing that you do, but if you're open to other ideas, you might be able to suggest something else that maybe you haven't directly done, but you know other people that have had success with it. And in my opinion, science is about seeking truth. But in order to get to the ultimate truth, we have to build up to it. And it's because what is ultimately true is just chasing an ideal. So I tend to see science as more through the lens, hey, we were less wrong about this thing than we were yesterday. That doesn't mean that we are absolutely right. And I think if more people can take like that view of science through that lens, it would lead to a lot less arguing and a lot less overthinking, and people would actually go out and execute on things and then try things and adjust and iterate their programs over time. Because that's what it's going to take regardless. You're going to have to adjust because eventually something's going to stop working the same way that it once did. Because what got you here isn't what's going to get you there. So you have to be open-minded and understand that sometimes it might be necessary to try something new that maybe other people say isn't optimal. But if you can stick to it, it's as optimal as it needs to be. And the third point is the evidence-based community tends to be a hub for overthinking and giving excuses for not taking action. Like I already said, thinking in terms of optimal before you even start is how you actually end up not doing something. And I personally would get stuck in this cycle of program hopping every week because there was always a new thing that was optimal. But whenever we chase optimal, we're literally chasing like pennies on the dollar. And we're chasing things that don't matter that much because we haven't even gotten the foundation of everything right. And those foundations account for 90% of the results. So it doesn't matter whether you want to do low volume or high volume. If your intensity isn't high enough, you're not going to get results. If the amount of work that you're doing doesn't increase over time, you're not going to get a lot of results. It doesn't matter if you want to do length impartials versus full range of motion, because if you're not even doing enough weight to provide the adequate amount of tension on a muscle, you're not even going to grow. So arguing over these things is dumb. And my biggest tip with a lot of evidence-based educators, or they're always trying to push their own agenda. They're trying to get you to pay money for something. They're trying to blow things up, make them seem like they're a bigger deal than what they actually are. And the funny thing is, a lot of people, they will do their own studies. And in their own studies, it'll say something along the lines of like, oh, well, this might be more optimal, but it's marginally better at best, which means very little, which means you probably shouldn't. But then they'll go on to YouTube, not that you shouldn't. But then they'll go on to YouTube and they'll promote it how, yes, this is going to be optimal. You should do this. It suggests this. This is the way, because I get it. They want to be seen as this expert and they want to be known and make money and live a lavish life, whatever it is. But still, like, come on. So the point of this is to be able to hopefully start to get you to ask a better question and start looking at things differently. And so that's what we're going to get into now, because this whole evidence-based thing, it's not a problem. The problem lies within a few individuals that are trying to make things seem like a bigger deal than what they actually are. And the problem more so lies in how the information is conveyed. And so a lot of these educators, like I said, they have an agenda, but as a consumer of that information, we have to be able to think critically and look at these studies ourselves beyond the abstract and the conclusion, which is what most people do. They read an abstract and then they read the conclusion and they think that they know the entire study. But there's always more to the story. So there are two specific things that you need to look for whenever you're reading through these studies in order to just be able to create a better picture of what is going on. So two things you need to understand. One, the language. What language are they using? Because the words they are using are very important. Two, the variables of these studies. So like, what was the patient population? How was the study conducted? What exercises were used? And what were they using to measure success or failure? And what other things were they measuring? So we look at language. Language is the foundation of our society. It's how we communicate. It's how we agree upon meaning and how we spread ideas. The words that these scientific papers use matter. Terms like volitional in the 52 sets per week study matters because that's going to give you an idea of how to interpret the study. If you don't know what volitional means, you won't even catch that part of the study, which is going to change your entire view of the study. But if somebody tells you volitional means when you think you can't go anymore, all of a sudden you're going to start thinking about everybody that has said that before and have like 5 reps left in the tank. Or if you think about a time that maybe you thought you were done and you had a lot more in the tank, now your gears are turning. Now you're starting to see, oh, this changes the entire view of how I'm going to see this study. And in terms of resistance training, going to volitional failure versus actual failure is a pretty large gap, and it's a pretty big fucking deal. And I know these papers can be very difficult to consume for a lot of people. And if you do take time to go through, Google search what words mean if you do not know. I am not the smartest guy in the room. Half the time I have no idea what certain words are in these papers, and I have to go to ChatGPT, highlight a couple sentences, and say, hey, can you break this down to an 8th grade level so that I can actually understand this? And then it starts to make sense. And that's another thing that you can do. Go and take a study, highlight a bunch of stuff, go into ChatGPT, ask it to summarize it for you ask it to rewrite it for an 8th grader or for whatever reading level you're at so that you can understand it. That's going to help the gears start turning a little bit more. But specifically, look at the words that they use. And if you do this, you will increase your ability to be able to understand and interpret studies better so you can start asking better questions and taking things with a grain of salt. Second, we have to look at variables. You have to actually critically consider what were the variables of the study. What was the population being studied? Was it old people? Because if I'm a mid-20s stud that's been in the gym for 5 years, I need to be skeptical of studies that were only done on elderly people. Why? Because their circumstances are not going to align to ours. A lot of the lengthened partial studies were done on either untrained individuals or the elderly population. Therefore, that should make you not necessarily write it off completely, but don't take it as being 100% fact, because that is going to matter to you, because your body is in a physiological, completely different point than somebody that's untrained or somebody that is old and haven't been training in a while. And then what exercises were used? Back squats are really hard to take to true muscular failure, and very, very few people can do it. The only time I've been able to actually ever truly do it was whenever I was in my peak powerlifting shape, also on PEDs. These things matter. In exercises like the back squat, there's always 99% of the time, there's going to be technical breakdown before there's true muscular breakdown. So studies that use a back squat as a means like, oh, we're testing for muscular failure. Is it effective? Though back squat's not going to show you that. Now, a quad extension might. Machines might, because the external stability of the machine is going to allow more force output through the muscle. So people are more likely going to get to failure, or at least really damn close. So another thing to consider is, how are they measuring results? What was its muscle thickness? So another important thing to consider is, what were they measuring? So how are these studies measuring results? If we look at hypertrophy, were they measuring muscle thickness, or were they measuring cross-sectional area? This is important because muscle thickness doesn't necessarily mean that you grew skeletal muscles. Muscle thickness also measures other tissues around muscle fibers like fascia and intramuscular fat, which can also contribute to muscle thickness. This doesn't necessarily mean muscle growth. Increased fat deposits in the muscles will make muscle appear thicker, but wouldn't contribute to the skeletal muscle that we're trying to build, or contribute to strength or performance like real muscle growth would. Now, cross-sectional area, on the other hand, is the exact thing that we're looking for, because that is exactly what they are measuring, is the skeletal muscle increase from training. So this doesn't mean that increased muscle thickness isn't something to consider, but for you as a consumer of information, it's useful to know and understand these types of words and the language that they're using, so that you know you need to take things with a grain of salt, consider it, look into it more, maybe sprinkle in a couple things to your training sessions over time and see if it works, but don't take it as religion. Don't take it as fact. And don't fall for internet marketers that are sitting here trying to tell you that you have to do length and partials or you're not going to grow. So with that being said, I love the evidence-based community. It's fantastic. It has brought us so much great information, especially to the layperson that may not be able to necessarily interpret studies the same way that a lot of academics can. But at the same time, this is where we also, as consumers, need to be responsible in how we are consuming information and making sure we are critically thinking and reading what these experts are saying, because we know that they're going to inflate things for their own agenda. And they're just going, a lot of it is clickbait to try to get an emotional rise out of people, because emotions create more content ideas, and they create, a lot of buzz, which means more attention, which means they go up in the algorithm, they get more views, then they get more money, and then potentially clients or whatever. So with that being said, I hope maybe this cleared some stuff up for you. If you have any other comments, leave it down below. And I'm also going to say, I know I'm going to get probably a couple of negative comments because people don't actually ever watch the full damn video of these things. So I'm just going to predict that now and then have them refer to it. But anyway, like, subscribe, leave me a comment, send me an email if you want to chat about something or have any questions. But until next time, peace.